Okay, I'm Dick Lucas, part of the Lincoln University Dryland Pastures team, and we're at Ashley Dene on the cemetery block in a paddock which is very dry, shallow, stony Lismore silt loam, and it's one of the driest parts of the Ashley Dene farm. It's December the 8th, and we've got past that period of profit making with legume dominant pastures in spring, and we're now in the phase where the pasture is really only marginally better than maintenance, and it's grass dominant because the sub clover has died out as part of its natural life cycle. Just perhaps a bit of more of a close-up of the soil to give you an idea of how stony it is. A very stony phase of the Lismore silt loam. We've got about 15 centimetres of topsoil with only a few stones in it, and then it's more than 50% stones in the subsoil. And the moisture holding capacity of the topsoil at best is only about 50 millimetres, and the subsoil only holds about 15-20 millimetres. At this stage of the season we've had less than average rainfall in every month since August, and the pasture dried off, the sub clover died out about 3 weeks earlier than average. And we're now into the typical dry summer, early autumn period, and we judge a lot of this country as having about 4 or 5 months dry each year. So there's really only about 7 or 8 months which is potentially productive when there's enough moisture. But of course you have to go through the cold winter period when temperature is limiting productivity. Today we're going to have a look at the perennial grasses, particularly that are sown with the annual sub-clover as the main legume which fixes nitrogen and provides elite feed for during lactation for the ewes and lambs. Okay, now we're in a paddock that was sown into ryegrass or cocksfoot, separate plots, in 2003. So this pasture is now nearly 14 months old, and you can see quite a strong contrast between the ryegrass plot here and the invasion and development of the annual grass weeds, the barley grass and mainly Walpia hairgrass, and how the ryegrass is largely thinned out. In contrast, we've got the cocksfoot plots here are relatively free of annual grass weeds. They certainly have some, but nowhere near as much as the ryegrass plots. And so in this 14-year-old sward we can see how much more persistent the cocksfoot is in this dryland situation. However, the problem with cocksfoot is that it's more aggressive towards our annual clover, which is the source of nitrogen. And you can see the strong nitrogen vigour of these in the urine patches compared with the nitrogen deficient cocksfoot, and so clearly we've got the usual situation of chronic nitrogen deficiency in a grass dominant pasture. One of the problems here is that the white clover that was sown with the grasses in 2003 died out after 18 months, and so in autumn 2005 we over-drilled with sub-clover 10 kilos per hectare, and that was very successful. However, now about 10 years down the track, the subclover is starting to thin out, and it's only present in a productive state on about 50% of the pasture. Of course, at this time of the year, the subclover has gone into a resting phase. It died out this year rather early in late October, early November, and it's put its burrs into the ground, and we're looking forward to actually mapping where the subclover is still looking good after the autumn break, when we get a decent rain, and we need to assess whether or not grazing management alone will allow the sub to be to recover and become stronger in this pasture, or if we have to actually introduce more seed to revitalise the pasture. What I should have mentioned earlier is that we regard this very dry area as a surrogate for a north-facing hill in the dryland areas of, say, Canterbury, North Canterbury, and in Marlborough. So, okay, we don't have slopes, but the water regime in the soil is very similar to what you get on the north face on the hill. So this is a good indicator for us of the likely results if intensive development is done on the hill slopes. Here we've got an illustration of the dormant part of the annual subclover life cycle. Here we've got some cocksfoot, and here are some dead runners of the subclover, and there's some burrs that didn't actually get buried into the soil, and we're looking for, there might be 3 or 4 seeds in that burr, and that, with a bit of luck, with a decent rain in March, will give us 4 seedlings. The ideal would be about 10 seedlings per 100th of a metre square, and that would give us 1,000 subclover plants per metre square, and that's the target population that we would like to achieve. This cocksfoot pasture at the moment is still growing, but it's due to slow down and actually become fairly unproductive through the summer. It's probably growing at about 15 kilograms per hectare per day at the moment. But so there's still a little bit of moisture around from some rain we got at the end of November.